I think he's awesome.
He has a great personality.
I think he's the epitome of good.
He's just a great young man.
He's really a special person, and I feel honored to be his mother.
He's a trooper. He is an inspiration to me.
He's just full of unconditional love, and I've just always admired him for that. I love him. He's my brother. I think he's awesome.
His smile was very disarming. I think that's one thing that you first noticed about him.
He's a perfect example, and I want to be just like him.
He's going to be a winner all through his life.
His attitude, that says it all.
He played every down like it was the last down he had ever played.
Anything that he wanted to be, he was great at.
I would never believe one kid could have that much impact on a football team.
He's frustrating to play against.
In wrestling, we tried to take him down several times, and I'll just tell you what, he was just quicker than snot.
I'd wake up in the middle of the night laughing because I knew people were going to go crazy trying to figure out how to cover this guy.
He always had his eyes on where he wanted to go and what he wanted to do in life.
Nothing surprises me what this kid does. I don't think there's a limit to what he can do.
I like the respect he shows my daughter. How I feel about him? I love him.
Hi, I'm Steve Young, and I'd like to tell you about a real hero of mine named Tyler Wilkinson. There's a difference between a hero and a real hero. A hero is created by popular demand and many times from the scantiest of materials. But a real hero is made of all the right stuff, like courage, enduring faith, dogged perseverance, true character, and the spirit of sacrifice. Tyler Wilkinson is one of the most talented high school athletes to ever come out of the state of Utah. On the football field, he electrified fans who came in droves to watch him make runs like this.
Big story again tonight has been Tyler Wilkinson. With the score tied, Spanish Fork will try to kick this ball away from him. He's been virtually unstoppable. He takes the ball on the 14-yard line. Tyler Wilkinson back to the 20, the 25, the 30. Breaks a tackle at the 30. He's into the open for a moment. They've got him trapped on the sideline. He runs over one man. Trapped again on the sideline. Breaks another tackle. He's heading for the end zone. He could go all the way. He's at the 20, the 15, the 10. Tyler Wilkinson scores again.
With bulldog determination and cat-like quickness, Tyler fought his way to become only the second wrestler in his school's history to win a coveted state championship. As a baseball player, Tyler was a pro prospect, hitting an amazing .450 as a center fielder and garnering first-team All-State honors. Throughout high school, he was a hero and the inspiration and envy of every young man who followed his spectacular career. Tyler K. Wilkinson was born on November 21st, 1972 in St. George, Utah, to Randy and Linda K. Wilkinson. From all outward appearances, Tyler looked like an ordinary baby, but inside that tiny body was housed an indomitable spirit that would one day push Tyler to real hero status. It's a fact that persistent people begin their success where others end in failure. Tyler's mother, Linda Wilkinson, remembers how persistent young Tyler could be.
Looking back over Tyler's life, I can see that he never would give up. No matter what it was he was trying to attain or accomplish, he would work and struggle until he accomplished whatever it was he wanted to.
When Tyler was just a toddler, his mother had as hard a time containing him as opposing linebackers would later on the football field.
One day when I was working in the house, I received a phone call, and this person asked me, "Do you know where your youngest son is?" And I said, "Yes, he's out back." And I thought maybe they wanted to talk to him, and she said, "Well, no, he isn't. He's on the roof, right up next to the chimney." And so I went out to look, and sure enough, there he was, trying to get down the chimney. So for his own safety and also to be able to keep track of him, I started tying him up to the clothesline, and it allowed him to get around the yard, yet keep him contained. He was really hard to keep track of. One morning, a neighbor called and told me that my son was over at the city park, which was just 2 blocks away. And I said, well, no, it couldn't be him. He's in the backyard. And I knew that he was because I had tied him to the clothesline. So I went into the backyard to check on him, and sure enough, there was the clothesline and the rope and Tyler's pants, but Tyler wasn't in them. He'd gone.
At an early age, Tyler's stick-to-itiveness and determination surfaced and developed into his trademark.
He always did more than what was expected of him for the size and the age that he was. His brothers often would comment that, where did he come from? How come he can do this? Or how come he feels like he's big enough for that? Or why does he always want to do what we're doing? And he just seemed like he had some innate thing inside of him that was pushing him further and further. And it was just like the paper route. Tyler wanted to take his brother's paper route because Travis wanted to give it up. He was only a kindergartner. He'd just gotten out of school for the summer, and he thought that would be a really fun job for him. He'd always helped his brothers fold the papers and do some delivery with them, and he was really a determined little person. So we called up the Spectrum and asked if he could, and they said no, he was too young. But he was really determined, and he wanted me to take him down to the Spectrum office and talk to him. He told them that he would be a good paper boy for him if they would just give him a chance for the summer. As Tyler imparted on his first experience alone, taking the total load of papers, it was a real concern for me to have him have the responsibility of it all by himself. He wasn't even old enough to make change, and the others would help him when it was time to collect. I decided that I should follow along behind and see if he was going to need some help. He was having such a struggle keeping the bags balanced on his bicycle, and the bicycle was pretty good size, and at times he would just fall over. One time when he was out, he threw a paper up on the roof of this lady's house, and he didn't want to have any complaints about his delivery, and so he got right off his bike and skinnied up a tree and climbed over on the roof and got the paper down and put it right on the doorstep. After that, he'd try to be really careful by just going over and placing it right on the thing rather than throw it, because I guess he didn't want to have to climb up on the roof again. He became quite a target thrower, and when he got into baseball, he could really put the ball across the home base fast and accurately because he had a lot of experience. That summer, he got more compliments than any paper boy that the Spectrum said that they'd ever had, and he felt really good about it.
Down on 2nd East, there's this huge yard we call Dan's Field.
Catch up!
We grew up there playing football as kids, and I think back and I remember Tyler's sophomore year when he took his first pitch and got outside and went 20 yards for a touchdown. A lot of people thought that that's where Tyler got his start on his big football career, but just to set the record straight, Tyler actually got his start on Dan's Field. I'll never forget one afternoon we wanted to go to Dan's Field to play football with our friends, and we didn't want Tyler to come. We were always afraid that he was too small and he'd probably get hurt, but Tyler, he always had other ideas. He was a tough kid to ditch because he had this little bike he could pedal about 100 miles an hour. We were sure we'd lost him, but we got to Dan's Field and we were all ready to play, and in rides Tyler on this 100-mile-an-hour machine. We said, why not? So we let him play. That was the best run I'd ever seen Tyler make, bar none. I knew right then and there that Tyler was going places. After that day, we always took Tyler to Dan's Field with us. He was usually the first one chosen. Looking back, those were great days.
James Allen once wrote, "Dream lofty dreams, and as you dream, so shall you become." Tyler's brother Troy is the oldest of the Wilkinson boys. He is a former Mr. Utah and national place finisher in the Mr. America contest. He can still remember Tyler as a young boy dreaming of becoming a great football player.
Ever since Tyler was born, he dreamed about being a great football player, dancing down the sidelines. He was a gifted athlete that worked harder than anyone I'd ever seen. While other kids were riding their bikes, riding their skateboards, Tyler was working out. We'd catch him doing 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and always flexing in the mirror, trying to improve his physique as much as he could and his strength because of his wanting to be a good athlete, a great athlete. We'd bring home our high school football equipment, and we'd catch him dressing up in it. He always talked about going pro and going far in college. Tyler would get upset when Travis and I would head off and go down to the gym to do our workouts because he couldn't go with us. So he would make up his own routines at home and work out by himself.
The dreams, the work, the waiting finally paid off. Tyler would at last get his chance to play somewhere besides Dan's Field.
The kid was phenomenal. You couldn't, we put our best athlete, one of our better athletes, our quicker kids on Tyler after we played him the first game, and we said, we got to stay with this kid. He can't get away from us.
Here's Brian Hickman, the quarterback, back to throw. Sprints out to the right side, throws long, deep. There's a crowd there. I don't believe it. Tyler Wilkinson caught the ball. He took it away from everybody. Touchdown, Dixie.
Without a doubt, I thought we were a better ball team than they were, except for Tyler. And the kid was he's just unbelievable.
On Tyler's final game of the season, an opposing lineman grabbed him by his jersey and tore it off his back. It didn't stop Tyler. He ran into the end zone for the touchdown, wearing only shoulder pads. Junior high schools normally don't retire jerseys, but in the case of Tyler Wilkinson, they had to make an exception. At the age of 15, Tyler was starting to show hints of what was to come. The relentless and disciplined workouts he had pushed himself through were beginning to show results. The time had finally arrived for Tyler to enter Dixie High School, a school renowned throughout the state for its football supremacy. Only one other sophomore had started in the backfield for Dixie High. Tyler dreamed of being the second. He set out to make his dreams come true. Tyler preferred to work out at night alone. He would run to Hanson Stadium, where the nationally ranked Dixie Rebels played their home games. At the stadium, Tyler pushed himself through a grueling workout, concentrating on making his legs as powerful as possible. As a sophomore, the first time he maxed out, he squatted 450 pounds. As a senior, he squatted an incredible 610 pounds, more than any player on the team. After his workout, he would sit high up in the bleachers where he could see the whole field. There, he would watch himself breaking tackles and dancing down the sidelines.
Sideline, cuts back to the center of the field. He can go all the way. This guy is amazing. He's going to do it again. Wilkinson, 85 yards, Dixie touchdown. I'm looking over in the crowd right now, and I'll tell you there are no prouder parents in the world than Randy and Linda Wilkinson as they watch the heroics of their son Tyler here tonight.
As a sophomore, Tyler was spectacular. In his first full varsity game, he seized the moment and rambled for well over 100 yards and was awarded Player of the Game by teammates and coaches. He led his team in rushing that year with an unprecedented 920 yards. Tyler's junior year was even more spectacular. With more hard work during the offseason, he garnered first-team All-State honors in 3 different sports. In the opening game of the season, with just over a half of playing time, Tyler rushed for 208 yards and 3 touchdowns, including this 85-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. With every opposing defensive player keying on number 33, Tyler was still able to amass 1,180 yards and 15 touchdowns. At season's end, coaches and sports writers throughout the state cast their ballots for the finest football players in the state. It was unanimous. Tyler was selected to the first team. To keep in tip-top shape during the offseason, Tyler participated in the grueling sport of wrestling. Blessed with lightning-quick reflexes and remarkable athletic ability, Tyler prevailed over wrestlers with far greater experience and was crowned Utah State champion in only his second year of wrestling.
Pound for pound, Tyler was the most gifted athlete that I've ever coached. There's no doubt about it. When we drill and practice, see, I weigh 180, and he'd take me, and we'd be practicing takedowns. He would take and shoot in on me and lift me in the air, and I would actually leave. He'd actually just throw me in the air, and then he'd catch me on the way back down. And then he was ever so gentle, setting you down. It wasn't his nature to be real violent or to hurt anybody. He never wanted to do that.
I had the opportunity of watching him in football and wrestling, and as well as playing for me in baseball, and I think he was probably one of the greatest that I had seen play any of those sports that I saw him in.
The very first time Tyler touched the football his senior year, he raced 56 yards for a touchdown. It seemed that every time the shifty quick back touched the ball, he was creating something exciting.
The thing about Tyler, I don't think one man could bring him down. It was we'd watch game films and decide what we needed to do against him, and and against the Dixie High football team. It always took 1, 2, 3, 4 players to bring him down. I mean, you'd wrap him up and he'd squirm a little bit and squirm a little bit. And I always tried to get 1 more yard, 1 more foot, 1 more inch.
He would go full speed this way and go full speed that way, just like that. It was incredible. He'd plant and boom, he's gone just like that. And then back again. I mean, and so you're like, ugh. You know, you see a lot of, professional players and stuff that, they're going full speed and they can turn and cut and then cut back on full speed. Well, you wouldn't think you could see that on a high school level. But, after playing against him a few times, he comes down and he's coming full speed at you, and so you think you're gonna have a pretty good collision, you're getting ready, the next thing you know, he's going the other direction, and you can't cut with him, and so you end up with a face full of grass. You could move from one side to the other at full speed, laterally, at full speed, and then hit upfield. I mean, I don't know if you ever tried that, but it's awful difficult.
He started for us for 3 years, and he wasn't a rah-rah type leader. He was a leader by example, of hard work and just hustle, and he never quit. He never quit. I cannot recall a practice or a game where he didn't give everything that he possibly had, all of the time. And he had such a vision of the field. He could see everybody and everything that was happening at the same time. You hear the term faked right out of your shirt. He literally did that.
With hard work and enthusiasm, a Wilkinson trademark, Tyler led his team to a near-perfect season, rushing for 1,300-plus yards and earning all-state first-team honors for the 2nd year in a row. But the game that will live on forever as Tyler's greatest in his brilliant high school career was in a state playoff game against Utah's tough Skyview High School. In his final appearance before his hometown fans, Mr. Do-Everything pulled out all the stops and played with total and reckless abandon, rushing for 269 yards and 5 touchdowns, personally outscoring the opposition 32-18. By the game's end, he had racked up 416 all-purpose yards.
I got a call from the Skyview coach that was coming down to play Dixie in a playoff game, and he asked me, what do we do to stop Dixie? And I said, you stop Wilkinson. He said, you stop Wilkinson, you stop Dixie.
One particular play in that game will never be forgotten.
Ryan Hickman sets his team in the I formation, sends his flanker back in motion to the near side. Here's the handoff to Tyler Wilkinson. He starts inside, veers to the outside, breaks a tackle. Now he's hemmed in on the sideline. 1, 2, 3, 4 men have got him. He breaks away. He's going to go all the way. Touchdown, Tyler Wilkinson.
Tyler had probably the best game I've ever seen a high school player have. He rushed for yardage, he returned punts, he returned kicks. He was phenomenal, just unbelievable as a running back.
In his 3 years at Dixie High School, Tyler had shredded enemy defenses for 3,400 yards. Every university and college in the state, as well as Stanford and Arizona State, were interested in Tyler as student athlete. But Tyler opted to remain at home in St. George and play baseball and football for nationally ranked Dixie Community College for one very special reason. His girlfriend, the lovely Jennifer Orton, who would also be enrolling at Dixie College in the fall. Tyler had his life all planned out. He would play 1 year at Dixie College, then serve a 2-year mission for the LDS Church. On his return, he and Jennifer would be married in the St. George LDS Temple for time and all eternity. Tyler had it all, a family that loved him, the cutest girl in St. George by his side, all stayed in 3 different sports and voted the outstanding athlete in his school. Life couldn't be better. His success in athletics had made him a hero. Tyler was on top of his world. But life has a certain ending and uncertain timing. It was F. Scott Fitzgerald who once wrote, "Show me a hero, and I'll write you a tragedy." On a brisk February day, Tyler left his home in St. George to travel to Springville, Utah, a 4-hour drive north of St. George. His mission was part business and part pleasure. Jennifer was performing as a member of Dixie High's drill team in state competition. Tyler was anxious to see her perform. Before going to the competition, he would deliver some equipment for his father's company. Tyler was tired but happy. He had just signed a double scholarship to play football and baseball at Dixie College. As he drove, he played his favorite music and thought about Jennifer. Even though Tyler and Jennifer talked freely about getting married after Tyler's mission, Tyler had never told her that he loved her. He knew this would be the special weekend. As Tyler approached the small town of Parowan, he started getting drowsy. Afraid of missing Jennifer's first performance, he decided not to stop. He pushed on. He turned up the radio and rolled down the window, hoping the cold air would keep him awake. The hum and drone of the tires on the highway played an eerie lullaby. Tyler's eyes grew heavy. He struggled to keep awake. Sleep finally overtook him. When Tyler overcorrected, the truck rolled, slamming hard on its side into the pavement. It then leaped high into the air, landing with devastating force on its roof. In the cab, Tyler could hear the terrifying sounds of glass breaking and metal bending and folding. And suddenly the roof of the cab caved in and collapsed on Tyler's head, driving his chin deep into his chest. Tyler was helpless, unable to move. A trailing trucker on his way home witnessed the accident. He radioed for help and comforted Tyler with words of encouragement until more help arrived. It took 6 men to get Tyler out of the demolished truck. Arrangements were made to life flight him to Salt Lake City.
I first encountered Tyler Wilkinson on the 16th of February 1991 when he was transferred to our hospital from the site of his injury in southern Utah at the time of his rollover. He had been severely injured in a half-ton pickup. Apparently he had to be extricated from the cab of that vehicle by blowtorches being used to remove the top. Having been a rollover, he undoubtedly sustained a compression and flexion injury to his neck and then was left in a cramped position inside the vehicle where they tried to extricate him, and then he was transferred to our hospital. This was an obviously powerfully built, athletic young man who was paralyzed from the neck down. We obtained x-rays in our emergency room documenting the fact that he had a severe dislocation between his 5th and 6th vertebrae in his neck, which correlated with the fact that ever since the accident, he'd not been able to move his extremities except for a little bit of flexion at his elbows, and had no motion or sensation in his lower body.
News of Tyler's crippling injury rocked and shocked all of southern Utah and the state's entire athletic community.
When I found out about the accident or heard about the injury, it was in the morning. And like any other bad news situation, I couldn't believe it. I would refuse to believe it at first. I thought, well, he's such a strong kid, he will survive anything. But it was like everybody else, it was devastating. And you get by yourself and you pray a lot, and you pray that he survives this. And this is what we did. And I think the whole community, I know the whole community did. And we like to think that pulled him through.
I couldn't do anything but cry when I first heard it. First of all, because of the individual. Second of all, we had a great loss on the ball team.
We were sitting in the auditorium watching the gals dance and giving support to the Jetettes. And they called me out and asked me to go out and visit with them, and they told me that it had happened. And it was very hard to believe, but the thought came to me that if anybody could pull through it, that it would be Tyler.
Late Sunday night, while Tyler lay in critical condition, his bishop, Larry Gardner, penned a letter to Tyler expressing his deep love and support. The letter was heartfelt and inspired. His letter would give Tyler the strength to fight the battle he was to face in the difficult days ahead.
I know that some are blaming God for what has happened. I know, Tyler, you're not. I explained to them that in the pre-existence we fought for our free agency, which is one of the greatest gifts that our Heavenly Father has given us. It gives us the freedom to act. The flip side of that gift is that it also gives us the freedom to be acted upon. We not only get to enjoy the blessings of a world governed by natural laws, but we also get the privilege of being subject to them. If God were to remove those laws and their governing influence over us, the whole plan of salvation would be disrupted. Tyler, you have been a high school hero in the way you have dealt with the opposition on the field. But now you have a chance to be a real hero. Everyone has to deal with some trial by fire. And since yours is presently one of intense heat, all eyes are upon you to see if your same spirit will prevail. Your example of faith, hope, courage, and determination will have a tremendous impact on others.
Tyler awoke at 1 a.m. Sunday morning. The muscles that helped him breathe were no longer functioning. The monitor that registered the amount of oxygen in Tyler's blood indicated that he was not in danger. But Tyler didn't care what the machine said. He knew he was in trouble. "I could hardly breathe," he would later say. It was like trying to breathe through a straw filled with liquid. If he didn't get help, he was certain he was going to die. He could hear the nurses in the hall. Unable to move his arms to reach the nurse's button, he did the only thing he could to try and get someone's attention. With great effort, he began clicking his tongue. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a nurse entered the room. Tyler was thrilled. It seemed like relief had finally arrived. Tyler mouthed to the nurse that he couldn't breathe and that he was afraid he was going to die. The nurse was in a hurry. She glanced at the machine and told Tyler that he was fine. Then she turned and left the room. Tyler couldn't believe it. He panicked. Adversity often comes with instruction in her hand, and from this experience, Tyler would learn perhaps the greatest lesson of his life.
You know, before I was ever injured, I saw people, in wheelchairs, and I loved athletics more than anything at the time, it seemed. And I thought, this is dead serious. When I would think, if that ever happened, if I was ever put in a wheelchair, I would rather die. I'd rather die in the accident than be in a wheelchair because I couldn't play football, I couldn't play baseball. And that's how you think, I guess, maybe when you're 18 years old or maybe when you're 30 years old. Just, I don't know.
Tyler was now faced with that decision. He looked deep within himself. Was his life based on football or baseball? No.
I prayed more that night than I ever prayed. And a lot of times when I prayed that night, I thought, saying, Heavenly Father, why don't you come and take me, to the other side? Why don't you just come take me right now? Because that's how I felt. It was just one of those miserable kind of feelings. And as I thought about it, though, I said, God, I never really asked him. I thought about asking him because I thought, if I really ask him, he might answer my prayer, and I don't want to die, Because I was thinking about Jan, and I was thinking about my friends, I was thinking about my family, I was thinking, yeah, I think there's some stuff to live for. I don't want to really die, even though I didn't like that time. But I was glad when the morning came. I was really glad.
Desire to live now replaced his fear of dying. He had so much to live for: family, friends, and Jennifer. He pleaded with his Heavenly Father to let him live. If his prayer was answered, he promised he would go on just as before, with the same zest and passion for life he had always had. There would be no room, he promised, for self-pity, bad attitudes, or regrets. There would be no looking back. He had been dealt a harsh hand, but he would play it well. He would live life to the fullest. He would never play the game of football again, but he could play the game of life and be a winner.
5 of his buddies were coming from St. George to visit him. They got there late. I made arrangements with the ICU nurse to take them in. We all went in together. I had to interpret for them because he couldn't vocalize his words, and so I read his lips. they told a few jokes, and he really wasn't laughing, and they were there for a few minutes, and then they left, and I followed them out, and they were very sullen and expressed to me that they had hoped that they would really be able to come and cheer him up and get things moving on. After they left, I went back in the room and expressed their feelings to Tyler, saying that, gee, they had hoped they could tell a joke or two and really get you cheered up. And his comment was, Dad, there'd be plenty of time for jokes. And I says, that's right, son. There's always a time for everything. And he looked at me and said, and I read his lips, and he said, no, Dad, there's never a time for a bad attitude. And I tell you, I was proud, and I was emotional, and I began to cry. And he says, Dad, don't cry. And I said, son, sometimes dads cry because they're so proud of their sons.
Tyler soon developed bleeding ulcers that would require special attention and daily transfusions. In the next 3 weeks, he would lose more than 60 pounds. He was handling all of this remarkably well, but there was something that continued to trouble him. What about Jennifer? What was she thinking? What was in her heart? He was no longer the macho football hero he used to be. He was a quadriplegic who doctors said would be confined to a wheelchair his whole life. Would the accident change everything? The thought of losing her was almost more than Tyler could bear.
He wanted to be alone with me. And he told me that he loved me for the first time. And of course I felt kind of shocked because that wasn't something that we talked about openly or we ever said to each other, even though we've been going out for so long. And then he said that he didn't want me to feel obligated. No matter what happened, he didn't want me to feel obligated. And I told him that it wasn't obligation that I felt, that it was love, and I loved him, and it wasn't obligation I felt ever. And that's something that he was nervous about for a long time after. But now he knows that it's not obligation. So.
Hospital employees had never seen so many people visit one patient. Entire football and baseball teams from all over the state stopped by to pay their respects and wish Tyler well. Letters, telegrams, cards poured in. Flowers and balloons filled Tyler's room. Heisman winner Ty Detmer stopped by the hospital to visit Tyler. Super Bowl champion Jim McMahon phoned to wish him well. A football signed by the entire Miami Dolphin football team was delivered to Tyler's room. The governor of the state paid Tyler a visit along with college and university coaches. Why did so many people care? You reap the harvest from the seeds that you plant, and Tyler had planted many seeds along the way. Coach Ray Odette still remembers a seed planted by Tyler in the heart of one of his friends and teammates.
In our ball game with our arch rival Pineview, which is about 5 miles across down here, we had the ball game, we thought, pretty well wrapped up in about the middle of the fourth quarter. Somebody kept tugging at my shoulder, my arm. Says, let's go for a bus ride after the game, Coach. Let's go for a bus. So we haven't got time for that. Says, we're going to get dressed and get out of here. No, let's go for a bus ride. Well, come to find out, he got a couple of the other senior football players, and they come up to me and started bugging me. Let's go for a ride. Well, the ride happened to be to a ball player that got hurt the week before named Matt Fowler, who broke his leg and couldn't go to the game, and he was listening to it on the radio. So we all got to the game, we all jumped on the bus and took off down the freeway, and I know people thought we were probably a little weird going to this kid's house. But we got out there with 50 football players singing some Dixie rah-rah songs and got out on his front lawn and started chanting, Matt, Matt, Matt. And here come his folks and Matt out, and it just tickled him. But this is the kind of things that Tyler did. He was our emotional leader, and he involved people, and he was extremely considerate of other people. And it's just the type of a young man that Tyler is. He's caring and concerning. Football game was not important to him. We had game one. But what was more important to Tyler at that time was to take care and look after one of his teammates.
After 3 grueling weeks in the hospital, Tyler entered the Western Rehabilitation Center in Salt Lake City. He had great hopes and aspirations. In just a matter of weeks, he imagined himself lifting weights and building up his upper body. But these dreams were replaced by the simplest of goals, things he had taken for granted in the past, like learning to sit up by himself, pushing himself in a wheelchair, touching his face, and putting on his own shirt. He was helpless and progress was slow. He threw himself into vigorous rehabilitative activity.
When I walked into the room to meet him for the first time, I will never forget the feeling in the room. That there was this kid that had had all these things happen to him, yet he was sitting there smiling, like, I'm ready to go on. I know this as bad as happened to me. What can you do for me? And I'm still going to be the best, and I'm going to tackle this problem. He was always one that would say, I have to set my goals high. And if you tell me that I'm not going to walk, I just can't believe that. I've got to set that goal high and keep striving for it. That's what keeps me going. And he would always, no matter what you did, he would always want to do it better or the best, like you say. Always want to be the best.
One vivid memory I have of Tyler is him laying in his bed, and he's wearing this halo, and his arms aren't really strong enough yet to do much of anything. He can barely click on the nurse's call button. And most people in that condition sort of want to put on veg state, you know, like, I'll just kind of wait here and let everybody buzz around me and serve me and all that until I can do more. But Tyler is in there in his room figuring out a way to itch his eyebrow. And he's in there flipping his arm up with the shoulder muscle he has. And as his arm finally gets high enough, his elbow goes the other way and he can't stop it, and his hand flops right into his face, either pokes him in the eye, the nose, or crashes into that titanium band that goes right across his forehead with the pin poking out of it right here, which is fairly sharp. And his whole arm would just crash into his face. And he'd say, ah, and he'd itch that face. And I'm thinking, that's a numb hand, like you and I wake up in the night, don't have any feeling in our fingers, and then the flesh feels cold, detached, and not part of us. And he's using that thing like a little flipper to itch his head.
Through all of this, another real hero was emerging. Devotedly, Jennifer would drive or fly to Salt Lake City every weekend to spend time with Tyler.
Through rehabilitation, I spent 3.5 weeks in intensive care. Then I spent about 5 months down in a rehabilitation center where I was going to learn how to do virtually everything again. And, you know, you can understand it was a frustrating and kind of a deal. It was really discouraging a lot of times. But the thing that put an edge on the discouragement was looking forward to Jennifer, you know, coming up every weekend. Every weekend, with only one exception. When she went on family vacation, she came up every single weekend. Whether it was for one day, you know, she would just come. Just, if she had to fly, she would fly up and fly back. My parents have made the situation I'm in so much nicer, so much better. Family members, you know, who are always offering their prayers for me, always giving me their support. It's made the burden light. And Jennifer's made the burden a joy. And our relationship has just grown and grown and grown because of this.
Tyler lived for the times he could spend with Jennifer. She was Tyler's confidant and closest friend. Their time together passed too quickly. Their time apart seemed to go on forever. Before leaving, on Sunday nights, Tyler and Jennifer would set goals for Tyler during their time apart. Tyler would work hard to show Jennifer his progress.
I think probably in high school, with having two older brothers, he always looked forward to his senior year because he knew about all the activities. And that was one thing that he got frustrated about and got down about a lot, was not being there for the end of the year activities, everything that went on our senior year, because it was so fun, and we had so many activities and so many different things that we did as a senior class, and we were a close senior class, and he would get really frustrated. And that's one of the, you know, he didn't cry very often, but that was one of the things that he would get emotional about.
So Tyler and Jennifer set a goal to have Tyler strong enough to attend high school graduation. This would mean leaving his electric wheelchair for one that he could maneuver himself. The first time Tyler tried to push himself in a wheelchair was discouraging. In over an hour, he was able to go only inches. That night, Tyler fought off discouragement by drawing strength from his football days. When When you fumble the ball or get tackled for a loss, you can't dwell on it, he kept telling himself. You have to keep going. He worked on a positive mental attitude like he had worked on everything else in his life. Never a holdout, always giving life everything he had. The next day, Tyler tried again.
Come on, Tyler, you can do it. That was a problem.
In all, Tyler went over 100 feet that second day. By anyone's standards, a heroic accomplishment.
I would come in here every day, and he would be here sometimes without a therapist, working on that machine right over there, the rickshaw, which basically works the triceps, which is what he had left, was to work with those triceps. And so he was maximizing everything that there was there to work with every single day, sitting there in his wheelchair, pumping that rickshaw up and down and up and down and up and down, relentlessly.
He's about the most motivated person I ever met who had that severe a disability. It's much easier for a person with more things to work on every day to be more motivated because they can spend hours and hours on the gym and still work different parts of their body and on different things. Tyler had a very limited ability to work on anything, but he took that limited ability and he widened it to a day-long approach to therapy. Just moving from the gym back to his room, he refused to take an electric wheelchair. He said, I'm gonna push this chair and I'm gonna find out if I can get it fast enough and well enough so I can go back to college in a manual wheelchair. It'll be better for me. And he said, don't worry, if I can't handle that manual wheelchair, I'll admit it that I was wrong and I'll come back to you and I'll say, you were right, give me a power wheelchair. But I knew just looking at him, he'd never do that. He would never admit that defeat. He would push that chair through snow before he'd come back to me and say, you were right, I need a power wheelchair. Because I would have said he does.
Just when it seemed Tyler was on schedule to make the trip to St. George for his high school graduation, adversity showed itself again. On March 10th, Tyler's lungs collapsed. In severe pain, he was rushed back to the hospital where he underwent a bronchiostomy. The successful man lengthens his stride when he discovers the signpost has deceived him. Tyler was determined to win. After 3 days in the hospital, he returned to rehabilitation and did everything he could to get ready for graduation. When word got out that he was working to come home for graduation, he was invited to be one of the main speakers. With a brand new perspective and wisdom, Tyler set to work composing a speech for his peers. He and Jennifer would retire to their favorite spot behind the rehabilitation center, where Tyler would dictate his speech to Jennifer. In the latter part of May, Tyler was flown to St. George in the plane of a close friend. He was excited to come home and be reunited with his classmates. Look at me, Tyler said, laughing. I'm 12,000 feet in the air and I'm still looking up. The red sand and red cliffs of southern Utah never looked better. It was great to be home. A record-setting crowd jammed into the Dixie College Arena and gave Tyler a well-deserved hero's welcome.
Tyler Wilkinson.
Tyler Tyler's speech was pure inspiration. Sitting there in his wheelchair, he had never seemed taller to those who came to listen.
My legs are a little farther than I thought now. First, just right off the start, I want to tell everybody to be careful, tonight. And stuff. My little sister, she didn't want me to bring it up, but she just got her license. And I used to think that us Wilkinsons were pretty good drivers, but we're not. Yeah, you have to forgive me for not standing up during the procession, right? Because I would have, but that little thing is flying around a lot.
The arena fell silent as Tyler spoke of trials, obstacles, challenges, sorrows, broken dreams, and heartaches. He was the teacher. Those present were his students. He taught them how to handle adversity. You must play the hand you are dealt, he instructed. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, that was the message. Cherish life, he counseled. Be happy. It's up to each of us to take control of our own destiny. Tyler returned to rehabilitation and completed his stay there. On May 19, 1993, the coaching staff at Dixie High School did something they had done only one other time in the school's history. They retired an athlete's jersey and number. Tyler's number, 33, would be the second.
But it says, Tyler Wilkinson, your number will never be worn again at Dixie High. Whew, that says a lot. This is what we're going to put up in our trophy case.
Tyler is home for good now in St. George, accomplishing more in a day than most people do in a week. He is furthering his education at Dixie College, where he is pursuing a degree in business. Tyler may not be running touchdowns, but he is scoring A's on all of his exams. Recently, he was awarded the Achievement of the Year Award, awarded to the student who has made unusual sacrifices to gain an education. Tyler is still anxiously engaged in therapy in and out of the home. He has grown stronger and progressed more than most people ever dreamed. To keep spiritually fit, Tyler spends an hour a day in what he calls his chamber of awareness, reading the scriptures. On Sundays, he is active in his church, where he teaches a youth Sunday school class. Tyler is pursuing a goal to become financially independent by supervising his first spec home and working as a computer analyst for a new financial firm in St. George. On the football field, Tyler became a hero for the way he dealt with the opposition. As a person, he has risen even higher, to real hero status because of the quality of his courage and the endurance of his faith.
Tyler was always the first one to jump up from the pile after he'd been hit, the first one to sprint to the huddle, and we like to relate that with his adversity in life. He will bounce back from any adversity, regroup, and that's what the huddle is supposed to be in football. You regroup and you start over again and you hit it again. And if it doesn't go, you bounce back again and you regroup and you get it again, and lo and behold, something works. And you break one for 50, or you break one in your heart and in your mind, and you have success. Tyler will do that. Anybody can do that, not just Tyler Wilkinson.
After he was through speaking to our youth up there, I had to make the comment that at one time he looked up to me as his coach. But now, after seeing what he's gone through and the things he's done, I totally have to look up to him. He's a beautiful person. From deep down inside, he's a beautiful person. And I love him. I truly do.
A lot of people have said that I've helped Tyler so much, and I'm always there for him, and I do so much for him, and maybe they can't believe that I stuck with him, and they think that's so awesome and everything, but what they don't understand is that it's a two-way street. It's not me doing everything for Tyler and me going up and seeing him every weekend at the rehab and me doing this and me doing that. It's not that. It's he does stuff for me too. He's as much of a strength for me, if not more, than I am for him.
It was midnight. It was late. I just helped Tyler get into bed, sat down on the edge of his bed to visit with him and talk. And we were having a good visit, and then all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, Tyler said, "You know, Dad, for 18 years, I was on top of the world. I mean, absolutely on top of the world. When you stop and think about that the Lord had blessed me with a great athletic ability, that I had a beautiful girlfriend with a wholesome relationship, that I had signed a letter of intent to play football under scholarship for Dixie College and to play baseball for them, and just getting ready to do my papers to send in for my mission and doing well in school, how could have I asked for more? I was literally on top of the world." And then all of a sudden, in a matter of 10 seconds, it all changed, absolutely changed. And when he said that, I have to indicate to you that up until now, I had always wondered, why have I never heard Tyler say, "Why did this happen to me? Why me?" Because I'd never heard him say it, nor have I ever heard him say it yet. But when he said that, we were alone at night, nobody else around, he didn't have to impress anybody, and I thought to myself, here it comes. Finally, for the first time, I'm going to hear him lament somewhat. And then the next thing he said was, "And you know, Dad, for the last 18 months, I've been on top of another world I would have never known about."
I can honestly say I feel like I'm on top of a whole different world now, a whole nother world. And I'm excited. I'm excited about what the future holds. I mean, I've got so much to look forward to.
Who will be the real hero when the race has been run? Who will be the real hero when it's all been said and done? Will it be the one who gave us everything they had to give? Those who would be real heroes know how real heroes live. There's a part of them that's knowing there's a price that must be paid, and they know it's when the going gets rough, a hero's made. Heroes know it's not the cheering of the crowds that gets it done. Heroes know the real victories in life are one-on-one. Yeah! There's so hearts somewhere